they need to put it into the
Oh,
stream.
that's true. They do have to do that. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Hi,
hybrid.
everybody. Good morning or good mid-morning. Hope you're at least a cup or two into coffee and ready to talk numbers. Super sexy, right?
Everyone's super
This
excited.
is another session in our series of the business of events. We really wanted to make an effort here at the Northwest Event Show to elevate the way that the planners are thinking about their event business and have a seat at the C-suite conversation. This morning, we're going to be talking about the roles of a chief financial officer and or, the way you look at your numbers for your event. Come on in. We're just getting started. I'm Lynn Edwards. I'm the founder of Proper Planning and been in the events business about 30 years. So crunched a lot of numbers in my day. Not a CPA, not a bookkeeper, none of that. But again, have found myself many times in the middle of a spreadsheet trying to interpret numbers. And I'm joined this morning by an amazing industry rock star here in Seattle, Brett Robertson with SHW. And Brett comes from a finance background.
I do.
When I
Recovering.
found that out, I was like,
Yeah.
you're on my CFO conversation. So we're going to dig in. We want this to be interactive. There's a mic at the back of the room, and it's also a small enough room. If you just want to shout out your question, we can repeat it from here. We'll go about a half hour, and then we'll have you guys jump in and really get interactive. So let's start off by, do you think event professionals see themselves as CFOs?
Let's throw it out to the crowd, actually. Let's
What
get
do you guys
interactive
think?
from the start.
Who here would say you're no?
Everyone put your hand up if you think you're a CFO in any shape or form.
Do you intersect your event numbers enough that you are telling a financial story, you are driving revenue, minimizing expenses, watching bottom lines?
Yeah.
See? So maybe you are
Yeah.
a CFO.
I think, from all of the planners and partners that we work with, I think if we asked any of them, that the thing that they would say they were the least was a CFO. And rightly so. All of the planners that I work with, they're all very creative. They're all much more out of the box thinkers than your typical CFO. And that's no offense to any of my CFO friends. It's just a totally different job. Yeah. Yeah, that's an absolutely fair statement. Yeah.
That's a really important point. And I think that, again, the intention behind this whole conversation is that you may not wear the official title of CFO, but you are wearing a financial hat on many occasions. And so what we're hoping to do is give you some tools to make you more prepared to tell your financial story and some things that you're going to be, either whether it's your stakeholders, your clients, your teams, interpreting these financials and what they mean to the bottom line of your event. So,
Yeah.
So what do you think? Do you think we're CFOs?
I do for the most part. Events are kind of an unusual investment for any company if you look at everything that a company spends money on, events are kind of a mystery to a lot of people outside of the event space. In a lot of cases, it can be a very big investment for an event. They can be tens of thousands, millions of dollars, and everything in between. They're finite, right? They happen now and then they're gone. It's not something that you can look to easily, years past and say, okay, that's what we spent our money on. So event planners are in that kind of spot where a lot of times they have to educate people outside of their world or their department on the value of the event and why that an organization needs to do it. So I think they are CFOs in their own right.
Welcome all the CFOs today.
Yeah.
I appreciate you here. Hope you got your Excel,
you can put that on your LinkedIn,
ready to go.
LinkedIn after this.
Yeah, add to your LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So we talked a bit on our planning calls about telling the financial story of an event.
Yep.
And how it may differ depending on who you're telling the story to. So tell me a little bit more about your thought process there.
Yeah, it's exactly right. So like I mentioned, so event planners and the ones that we work with, you guys are the central hub and you have to tell information to maybe a CEO, to your own marketing team, to a CFO. And each of them will likely want to have different things that are important to them that come out of an event. So for example, if you're talking to a CRO, Chief Revenue Officer or VP of Sales, they don't really care what it costs. They want to care how many leads they're going to get. They want to care how much business they're going to get out of that event. Talking to your marketing person, your marketing lead, they might want to know how many impressions they're going to get, things like that. Whereas your CFO, a big thing for them is return on investment. how much money are we spending and how much money are we going to get back? And,
Right.
is it more? So being able to articulate that, and sometimes it can be a little bit creative, artistic, I should say, because some of this stuff is not hard numbers. Things like you might have an event to retain clients, right? So being able to measure how you've retained your clients. That should be something a CFO is interested in. There could be even hard and fast numbers that come out of your event. You might have sponsorship, you might have ticket sales, things like that you can report on. But yeah, lots of different things to
I
think
think that
about.
was such a great point because I'm typically using the same conversation with those different folks, and I probably have not customized it enough depending on who I'm sharing those numbers with. Oftentimes with state or regional and national associations, you're talking to a board that doesn't eat, sleep, and drink the numbers of your event. They just need that high level touch point of, are we going to be in the black? Are we going to meet our goals? We talked yesterday about the CEOs and making every event as a business, understanding your goals and missions, because that's going to flow into your financial decisions.
Yeah,
And as
100%.
are making decisions when you're faced with a CFO saying, nope, sorry, we have to cut the budget by $10 million, at $10, you're the people then that have to go back and figure out where that $10 is going to come from and what you can achieve your goals with, but still do it on a leaner basis there.
Yeah,
So
that's exactly right. Yeah. Yeah.
anything to add to that around just,
Budget cuts.
yeah,
Yeah, not my favorite two words for sure. I kind of look at budget cuts in two ways, and we've probably all dealt with this, where you get like the event you're working on right now needs to cut the budget. And then the other side of it is you might have a program or a series of events that you work on, and your entire marketing budget gets cut down. So I kind of think there's kind of two different strategies with how you deal with that. In the short term, like the immediate event that you're working on, I would go back to your goals and objectives of the event and use that as your guiding star of where you can cut. And I am a CPA still, so I've got all my notes, so bear with me. So depending on the event, so for example, we work with associations, and a big part of their programs is to provide at their annual meetings continuing professional education for their whatever it is they do. We work with dentists in Washington State. So in that particular case, if we had to cut the budget, the goal of that meeting is really for these dentists to get CPE. So I would look to cut the ancillary stuff around it before I cut the CPE spend. So maybe we have less happy hours, we don't have coffee in the morning, things like that.
no sugar
No sugar.
anywhere on the
The dentists don't want that anyway. But then it goes, some other examples, you might be working on a President's Club trip or an incentive trip. What we found, and the goals and objectives of those events is to really reward and retain your very key, it might be salespeople. What we found, or what I found at those events, you get a lot of hangers-ons. It could be executives, VPs, level people that bring their families, and that, and which is good, but that might not necessarily be there for the core reason. So I would look in that particular case, keep the money spend with the people that you're looking after and cut the non-essential headcount. Might be a tough conversation to go to the CFO and say, hey, we need more budget. And by the way, you can't come to the event.
That's right. You're not going
But
to Hawaii.
it is what it is. So,
Yeah.
so getting back to that. And then longer term, when you're looking at your overall budget strategy for a series of events, some of the things that we looked at, we're jumping around on our questions, but longer term planning if you can. So I feel like the world in events in our world is so short term right now, even more so post pandemic. But where you can build time into your planning process, it just allows you to shop around, essentially. Yeah. Secondly, one of the other things we would look at is if you can use the same vendors across programs and across events. I can tell you from our side of things as an agency, we are always substantially more efficient in year 2 than we are in year 1. And that's just because there's a ramp up period to get to know the new client and the new event and things like that. But yeah.
Those are all fantastic ideas. And I think one of the things that when we talk about thinking like a C-suite executive is every business needs to know their numbers. So if you don't, the first place to start is to make sure you know your numbers. And I mean that you can recite them, what kind of revenue you bring, what revenue streams does it come from. 50% of our, know your numbers enough from a high level talking point, understand what's your biggest spend, what are the 2, 3 areas that are the biggest expense of your event. I tried to do a site visit recently in Chicago, and I was looking for one room for one night, in and out, just needed to look at the space. And the salesperson was like, no, it's going to be $387 to stay with us. I'm like, no industry discount, no planner
Yeah, right.
comp. I'm not coming for vacation.
Yeah.
And I remember saying to her, uh, your revenue manager is not willing to come off of $387 for a $2.3 million piece of business. And the salesperson was just like, and it's a very simple thing, again, to be able to go, I know what I bring to the table. My event equals 2.3. My event equals $350,000 in the contract, but we're also spending money in your ancillary, in your other venues at the bar where, they're bankers, they spend a lot of money. We know what our business is worth to you. So when you go into any negotiation, when you go into explaining your event, you need to understand your high level numbers. Does that make sense to everybody? Do you guys feel like if whatever event you're working on right now, you feel like you could tell me your numbers? What are your revenue streams? What are the percentage? Where's your money coming from? Where's it going out the other side? What's your net goal? Yeah, how much money you want to take away at the end. And this is a big conversation for a lot of our clients where I'll say, many say, we don't need to make money. This is a spend. We're having this event to generate leads, to thank our employees, to get our team consolidated. They just have a line item in their budget. They're going to write a check for $250,000 to go have fun. That's different from an association who needs to generate $150,000 at the end of the day to run their organization year round, right? Huge difference in that type of event and what the money means to those folks.
But even on that,
Yeah.
even with the internal events, I think thinking obviously keeping costs and budgets and revenues in check is definitely key, and something that that you all are really, I'm sure, fantastic at now. But on the outset, having those next level measures and metrics that you can include as part of your post-con decks, as part of how you set up the event, can be vitally important, even for internal events. We do all hands meetings, and we can survey the company employees. How do they feel? And then we'll track if they learned what they were supposed to learn, track if we retained, the people that we're supposed to retain, things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it goes back to that return on investment, right?
Yeah,
We're spending this
exactly.
money. We went to Hawaii. We had a good time. What did it mean to the company?
Yeah.
Telling that story. I also think on the financial side, it is getting creative with the storytelling. For example, I'm just throwing out some random numbers. We should add this $10,000 AV expense and then be able to break that down and go, that's literally $12 more per person this year in our conference fees. Do we all think $12 is going to deter a bar association member from coming to the annual conference? Because if not, if you can break it down in that little palatable bite, then people would kind of be like, yeah, let's raise the conference registration by $20, call it good, have what we need for sight and sound. Does that make sense? So it's taking the numbers and interpreting them in a way where people can kind of understand. The other piece is when decisions are made, sometimes need to be made, and people are stakeholders, clients are dragging their feet. We will say things like, if we don't decide by Friday and select this entrance unit, it's going to go up $5,000. As soon as you start saying numbers like that, people are like, oh, definitely get the unit. Yep, it's a go. Or no, we don't want it. Okay, so using numbers in that, they're very powerful that way in helping prompt a decision when you can tell that story. Anything you want to add to that?
No, I think that's 100% correct. Yeah.
I think the other thing is setting, and I know we have some association planners in here, so I'm kind of talking to that, setting your ticket sales price, right? You have to understand your expenses. And I had a client that had never taken, I said, take all your expenses, divide them by the number of people who are coming. You have your overhead per person, and they had this crazy overhead, $1,200, and they were charging $250 to come to the conference. I said, okay, so we're making a conscious decision that sponsor revenue is going to offset this. But also, every time you give away a free ticket to John and Bill and Dave and whatever, you're giving away $1,250. They don't understand that. And we had another group that gave all their speakers comp registration and a full registration, meaning they could come to all the meals, all of that. These are people who were not professional speakers, they were subject matter experts. They would have paid to come to the conference to get their CEUs
Yep.
anyways, and they were cannibalizing their attendee revenue. Now, granted, yes, you come, you speak, we want to give you a free ticket. That sounds great, but when you looked at the budget, they were like, oh, wait, whoa.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, and also thinking like a CFO, I think specifically with associations, it might help you strategically think about what you need to work on. So, for example, you might be tasked with sponsorship sales and exhibitor sales, and you know, and this is a theoretical. It might be easier to sell one $50,000 sponsorship than it is to sell 50 $1,000 booths, right? So having that next level thinking can really direct your actions and where you drive the team as well.
And I think it flows into everything. If you realize that your sponsors or your funding partners are offsetting the cost of the ticket from $1,200 to $200, what are you doing to really make sure you're keeping those sponsors happy? You're re-upping them every year. You're over delivering value so they come back, because your numbers don't work if they don't show up, right? So, and understanding what the market will bear. You know, you're pricing your product like any company, that the financial story of what's the right price for this product. You need to do a competitive analysis. You need to understand what are other people paying for their annual conference. Does it include travel? You need to really, I guess I would say, be curious about your numbers. Might really serve you to be curious about, oh, what's the financial story inside of this event, not just the focus of whether we're going to have blue or green linens. I've been using that story, but we get in the weeds, right? And we think about the color of the linens when we're not really elevating out to look at our financial picture. So being a financial wizard here, what's
Recovering finance person.
recovering?
Yeah.
I love that. I'm going to someday be a recovering event person. I'm not sure when, but I have that too. So what are some of the tools that you use to track your numbers and then to extract reporting?
Yeah, it's a good question. You know, I think it probably goes without saying, and it's no surprise, and I probably would guess that everyone in this room uses some type of spreadsheet, be it Excel or now Google Sheets are a really good option. There was a time where there was a few other options that were popping up, things like Smartsheet. I think CVET even had a module for doing budget management. But I feel like everybody comes back to the trusty old spreadsheet. Especially now that there's online versions where you can collaborate with clients or with other colleagues to put it together. That seems to be the best way of doing it. Yeah.
I think that's great. And I asked my son what the most important class he took was in college, and he said Excel.
Yeah,
And I said, I
it
probably
really
used
is.
20% of its capabilities, right? And this is the story over these last few sessions we've had is you don't need to be a professional marketer, but a marketing class go a long way to help you understand. Some sort of an Excel class to understand, or financial management
There is
class.
so much benefits that you can get from a
Yeah.
1 hour Udemy Excel class that could save you literally days of battling a spreadsheet. And we have it with our team. One of the things that we do with our team, and we're lucky in that we have a finance department. So I talk to our event planners and I'll say, look, if you're working on something and it's taking you, if it feels too hard, it probably is too hard. You know, go talk to Yoshi, our accountant, and have him work on it. And there's a situation last week, one of our senior event planners, Mark Penarosa, he was working on something and it would have taken him 2 days, and he sent it off to Yoshi and he did some fancy formulas and had it back in 15 minutes.
That's amazing.
And literally that was the example. And because he'd done it at the previous event the previous year and spent 2 days doing it.
That's amazing.
So, yeah.
I also think in doing budgets, I found that it's super important to show your work. I don't know if they still do that in classes these days, but when I'm doing an event budget, we have this notes column, this area where we're showing the work to go like, well, how did you get to the number of 60,000 for catering? Well, here's the breakdown. It's 50 people out of this plus. What did if we saved money because we found a print program sponsor this year and the number is 0 in the spreadsheet, if someone's inheriting this budget next year, we need to say this was sponsored. And the retail cost could have been $5,000 in printing. Keep that in mind next time you're setting your budget.
Yep.
I'm a big fan of running a budget and then and I might be doing this wrong, so I'm here looking for help too. But then I run a projected column.
Yep.
And so it's like what I consider
Iterations.
the live dynamic.
Yeah.
What's the real, where are we at compared to setting the budget and not touching it for reference, and then running this projected. And then I tend to highlight when something is going to be spent
Right.
and whether it's mission critical. So if I'm looking at my top line of income and I'm like, oh, we didn't raise 50,000 in sponsorship, we raised 5,000, or we're not tracking, we don't have 200 people coming at $100 a piece, then I'm able to go down onto the expense side and just decide where
Where
are
you need
those
to cut it.
cuts,
Yep.
when can they be made, when can those decisions be made, and how does that align with when the money's coming in, and then also uh, which of these things are mission critical for the event. And so I kind of color code that. I don't know if that is that
That's
wrong.
I love it. That's great. Yeah.
But
I
at
do
any
like
time I
the
could
idea
look
of,
at it and be like,
you know,
okay, I could cut this if I had to.
yeah, I do like the idea of having your initial budget and then, maybe a separate column as you go through the iterations if you update it monthly or whatever the period of time is.
Yeah.
And then explaining those differences for exactly that reason. So that's a
Yeah.
good strategy.
Variance. So yeah, so let's talk
Variances.
about
Yep.
variances. When you set this budget, set it and forget it. When you are off track, the GPS, you are now off
Yep.
track. I wish there was a financial prompt for that. You are now off track. But that is something where you need to be tracking the variances. If everybody understands that part about you thought the program was going to cost you 2,000, it's coming in at 5,800.
Here's
Where are you going
why.
to make those adjustments to
Yep.
still hit your numbers?
And it can help you explain it. If you have to go back to the well, some people, you might have to work with procurement.
Right.
God bless their souls. But
And also that notes column of
Yeah.
the reason it was 5,800 is because we had twice as many people as we thought, so we had to
Yeah,
put twice as
exactly.
many programs.
Exactly.
So
There's
the
always a driver.
justification of that.
Yeah, it's the driver.
Yeah.
The underlying drivers that drive that financial information is kept in the notes. But
You heard it
when-
here, the driver.
the thing with spreadsheets there, and we've probably all done it, where some of the tips I would say is try to get it locked down as much as possible. How many times have you entered a row, but it hasn't updated the sum column at the bottom, and the budget is not adding up to what really the budget is. If you have a finance department, I would lean on them to help you create the documents as well and lock it down, so that it gets them buy-in as well. Like if you have to go back and review it with them, they understand it and they know where it's coming from.
Absolutely. And I
yeah.
think that, numbers are scary. The whole show your work thing, I didn't even like that. I took 6 years of French to avoid math in college, but numbers are scary, but the big numbers, understand the big picture of it is interesting, and I try to get my young planners on my team to get excited about the numbers and tell me a cool story about the numbers. And when we're telling the board, they don't need to know it was 3,759 and 37 cents. They don't care about that. They want to know it's almost 60 grand. It's 10 grand over last year. We're behind by 30 grand, and this is what we think the reason is. Does that make sense about storytelling around numbers versus providing, and particularly stakeholders that, again, don't eat, sleep, and drink the event as numbers? They just want an update on, are we tracking? Are we behind? Are we ahead? Why are we tracking? Why are we below in this area? So tell me a little bit about when your team comes to you and they're sharing an event budget.
Yep.
And they're reporting out their story, their particular event story, and the variances. What are the things that you would want to hear?
So I would want to know the underlying drivers, so it's up because, costs are up because we've got 50 more people or 100 more people registered, or things like that. Like the underlying, the numbers are just like the output of what's happening. Ticket sales are up, ticket sales are down. AV spend is up because of Tony. Why is AV spend up? Guys in the back, you're killing us.
Okay.
Yeah. And what is the actual drivers? What are the things that are actually happening that are making the numbers go where the numbers go?
And I think if you understand the numbers, when you come to the financial stakeholders, coming with solutions,
Yep.
right? We're down 10% on sponsorship because a lot of these businesses closed during COVID.
Yep.
Here's what I think we should do. I think we should run a special strategy on ticket, hot sale price. We should do a BOGO. We should not have the reception. We can still cut it. Nobody was told they were going to have a party.
Yep.
So coming with creative solutions, I think that elevates your event planning game to no end. You have the ear of the C-suite folks that you understand your business unit of this event. You understand the numbers, you've interpreted them, you're reporting them, and you're coming with solutions.
And the solutions, and you can also get help. If you go to a CFO or a CMO and say something like, our F&B budget's 10% over, that really means nothing to them. But you can say, we've got 10% more people.
Right.
and that's the driver for the cost being up, then they can come with a strategy to mitigate it. It might be fantastic, great, or it might be, well, we need to cut the people back. So whatever that, less people internally go to the event than external or something like that.
What about reporting the actual numbers? Do stakeholders want to see a spreadsheet with all that? Do they want a
Yeah,
slick
it's a case by
PowerPoint with
case.
stories?
Yeah, more the PowerPoint nowadays, I think.
Okay.
And we structure some of the stuff we do based on the audience. We might have a report that we send. So, for example, a post-conference review that we do with our clients. What we give our event planners, our event planner clients that are the first line, will have all the detail in the world, because they want that, they need that. But then we'll have a deck that's a shortened version of highlights that might go to their boss if it's marketing, CMO, that type of thing.
Excellent.
So we always try to tailor that message depending on the audience.
Yeah, excellent. Think that, let's look through your notes real quick. Make sure
Yeah.
we hit on all the high level stuff. We talked about the tools to use, which
Yeah.
good old Excel.
Budget cuts.
Budget cuts, how to determine what's mission critical. I think we wanted to, in the budget role, understand what the resources were. I think that reporting out and understanding how to share those. What do you think is the most critical piece of thinking like a CFO? When you put your CFO goggles
Yeah.
on, what should these folks be thinking about?
CFOs are, cold calculating people. Now
Like,
I love them.
like spies? Okay,
So,
good to know.
they're the ones that really do need to see the numbers. So the things I'd be looking at is the return on investment and being able to articulate that, in a 30-second, this is why we do the event. This is what it means for the business. This is what it means for the business financially right now and eventually. Some of the events that we do, we know that there's a long-term return, right? If it's driving customers, if it's maintaining an association base, whatever it is. So being able to articulate that, and even to the point where I say, look, it's going to cost us $50,000 for this event, but I'm projecting because of X, Y, Z that we're going to make $150,000, be it by retaining clients, new clients, generating leads, things like that.
And for a long time, it was hard for event planners to figure out how to get those key KPIs and what that ROI is, but it is so critical. I mean, I've had CFOs literally choke on a linen rental line item and just go, I don't get it. Can't we just get paper ones in there? This is crazy talk over here.
We see that a lot. It is a mystery to some CFOs, right?
Yeah.
And they understand travel expenses, they understand hotel expenses, they understand food and beverage, but they don't understand necessarily events. And there's a nuance as events planners as well that, it can be a big investment, but you might work with 100 different vendors for 2 days, and then you'll never work with them again, which is different to other types of procurement that might happen within an organization where, they might have a long contract with a software provider and, a 10-year lease on a property.
Right.
Whereas the event can cost just as much as those can and more. But it happens like that, and then it's gone. And then you start again, and you've got 100 new more vendors that they don't understand. So one thing that we are seeing now specifically is that across all levels of procurement with the economy of the state that it's in right now, is that CFOs are having a much more vocal view on where all companies spend their money. So being able to talk like a CFO, I think, would be beneficial, specifically people on the corporate side or even, with some associations and nonprofits, would be beneficial as we're planning for the next 12 months or so.
And I think as planners, I've shared before that we have this deep, wide toolbox of things that we're required to do. So we are required in some capacity to be a CFO. If someone on your team is particularly excited about Excel and formulas and all that stuff, put somebody in that role that loves telling the number story. They can come to you and they can brief, and here's what we've done, and this is what I think the variance is, why the variance is. And I think that when you talk to CFOs, I had an interesting scenario just recently with the CEO having a vision for this offsite and the CFO shutting everything down, right?
Yep.
The CEO was like, it's all about culture. We're going to have swag. We're going to have bonfire. We're going to this cool place. And the CFO was like, no, we're not. Like they literally, and I was in the room, when you get in that C-suite room, in the room with them going, ooh, this is not my fight. Let them figure this out. He has a vision that he's asked us to create, and he has to figure out how to pay for it. And they got to go through this round of knock down, drag out to figure out what we need to do on the execution side. But
Yeah.
I do think that we should all make a commitment to understand our numbers. And if you have someone in your team who's really particularly digs it, throw resources at them to train them up, get great sample templates or decks. Let's talk about vendor sourcing for a second.
Yep.
Because if if you're a CFO and you're trying to watch the bottom line and
Yeah.
squeak every last penny, your take on just vendor
Yeah. So
sourcing?
one of the questions that we had was about
Look at him with his notes. I'm just like
where
putting
is
my
it?
phone
It
down.
was
We're going to
about
chat about numbers.
examples where budgets have gone off the rails.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That was one of them. Yeah, and it was hard to relive some of them actually, to be honest. So vendors, we hear the hot topic about inflation and things like that in the news every day, which I think is, what is it, 8 to 10% or something like that. I think in the events worlds, it's probably between 30 and 50%.
Probably right.
And some of it is fair, as we've recovered from the pandemic, we got hit the hardest. In our 45-year history, 2020 was the worst year by far we ever had, and I'm sure it's the same for everyone else. So understanding that it is what it is and being able to articulate it, that this is why to your procurement teams and your finance teams is something that would be key.
And I think asking vendors, I was surprised. I was sharing with the AV Tech yesterday. I had learned from my AV vendors that the warehouses that they used to have here in Seattle during the pandemic all consolidated to California.
Yep.
So when I used to be able to call up and get a tree, sound system thing, now sometimes that's coming and it has to be shipped. So plan early, but it's now coming and it has a shipping cost to it because I can't just run down and pick up a speaker. So understanding kind of from your vendors, what's this increase attributed to?
Yep.
So they can help tell their financial story so you can interpret it and you don't get caught on your heels of why is our AV budget up?
Yeah, and one of the things too, one of the tips from that we learned is that sometimes when you start a new program or an event that you've done before and you're getting into the next year, you might take the numbers from last year and use that and add 5% and use that as your starting point for getting your initial approval internally. That is not what we do anymore. We used to do that. That was a good strategy in 2019. Now we start from scratch every time because the bus company that we worked with last year in Seattle probably has a vastly different price this year in Seattle.
Yep.
The caterers are struggling to get staff, right? And so what they paid their people 2 years ago to what they pay their people now is vastly different. And that's okay.
Yeah.
It's just that we have to, we start from scratch now versus,
Yep.
just taking it. And like the point you mentioned before about having that zero and the printing, it's we zero everything out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It starts from zero. The other thing is asking your vendors to help you if you have to cut, right? A strategy of we've got to cut $10 million, $10 out of this budget. What can you do to meet us there? And I find vendors, and I've had long-term,
Yep.
many, many years of business with certain vendors where I'll be like, help me cut this. Tell me what is not mission critical.
Yep.
What can we cut that's not going to impact the guest experience or the outcome of the event? And oftentimes they'll get their pencil out and sharpen it up. And if it's just there's that transparency of I got asked to cut 10 million, what can you do? Can you come towards me in some way? And they tend to sharpen pencils.
Yeah, I mean, all vendors just like that transparency, right? And
They do.
It's the same with us as an agency. We have some clients that will give us an RFP, but there'll be no budget.
Right.
And okay,
Throw some numbers at the wall.
Are we serving hot dogs or are we serving
Yeah.
caviar?
And
that type
there's
of thing.
like a weird
And-
negotiation thing where you don't want to show your hand, right? So
Yeah.
you don't want to say, okay, I did have 75K in the budget for AV, and they're coming in at 84 or whatever, right? And you're kind of, but I find that sometimes, or if they came in at 60 and you're like, what else could we add that would be cool? Again, I don't want to say the budget first.
Yeah.
Don't say the number
Yeah.
first. But on the other hand, when you can give them a range and be like, if there's any way we could keep this under 60, that would help my budget out tremendously. And inevitably, again, to keep the business and the long-term relationship, they'll try to work with you on that.
Yeah.
And then say, well, can you explain to me again? One of the things that we found very beneficial is trying to figure out cost efficiencies. We've gone into venues where we've used the same AV provider that was already set up the day before for another event, and we've shared that vendor and saved a ton on labor because the room was already set with all that gear.
Yep.
I mean, it's getting kind of out of the box.
Yeah, exactly. But that's our job, right?
That
Out
is
of the
our
box
job.
thinkers.
Yep, to make it work.
The other thing with vendors as well is that each and every vendor will have a different quote that looks different, and some will have they'll include taxes, but they won't include gratuity, or they'll include a service charge and they won't include taxes. What we really push is, to get the quotes in a format that we're really comfortable with, and working with our vendors to do that specifically, so that we don't get caught out. We've been caught out in the past where quotes haven't included whatever percentage charge. And when it's a
Absolutely.
big, when it's $100,000 catering bill and it's 10%, it can be a
And
shock.
I found that there are so many random fees that keep creeping in.
Yep.
Like when you go to a hotel and then you're like, plus the $25 resort fee. You're like, I'm at the resort. What are you doing
Yeah,
for me? $25 more or what?
I know,
You
exactly.
planned for me to be here, open the pool, and make sure it was clean. Like, what is this 20? And so I find with vendors, same thing. All of a sudden there's some random fee at the end, and I'm just like,
Yeah.
and I think when you stack your vendors up, and I think comparing bottom line, I tell my team when they go get quotes out the door, I always say to them, and they'll be like, "Oh, sorry, Lynn, no,
Yeah.
plus tax." I'm like, "I need out the door.
Yeah, exactly.
I need that out the door to go apples to apples." But also, when you do comparison of knowing your numbers, I went to one place where we had at some point deep in we picked the hotel, we were down the rail, $98 per gallon for coffee.
Yeah.
And this group they
That's cheap
drank.
nowadays, actually.
It is. Well, it's back in the day, 30 years back in the day when it was usually 20.
Yeah.
And then but when do you find out the cost per gallon of coffee? Sometimes it's not until you've already decided we want to be in this pretty place. And it really, when you start comparing different venues and the cost all the ways out the door at this venue, one venue might have a $20,000 Wi-Fi fee, and the other does. Like, you really have to run the numbers all the way to the finish line to say, what does it cost for our entire show to be at this place versus this place, and why? Again, go back to the variances. Why would we pay $20,000 more to be here? It's like, it's closer to get to. Our people are going to spend less money in travel. They're going to, you've got to tell that story of why it's worth it to spend the extra 20,000 and where there might be some other cost savings.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Any other
RFP process on the front end.
tips on? Everybody's worried about the budget. Everybody's trying
Yeah.
to walk lean and.
I have some other examples of budgets that have gone
bring it.
sideways.
We got a few more
You know,
minutes. Then we're
just
going to open for questions. So
just to rub salt in the wound. So we talked about, inflation. That's a big one right now. Another one is hotel attrition, unfortunately, is coming back to some of our, association clients and things like that, people that do user conferences and stuff like that, as other companies are cutting down on their transient travel. So to mitigate that, it's super important that you have solid relationships with your hotel folks and give them as much information as possible early on. If you need to move a cutoff date, if you need to ask them to resell rooms, even though it might not be in your contract, getting onto that stuff early is key.
And I think that's a good point. I'm not sure enough planners really understand that every single thing is negotiable.
100%.
Don't you agree?
Yeah,
I think that's something you
that was
don't
the
learn
biggest
until a little
learning
bit.
that I came into when I first started working at SHW.
Yeah.
The fact that I used to work for a software company, and we would get our executive team together of, I think it was 30 people would get together 3 times a year, and we'd all just go book our own hotel rooms and
Yeah.
pay whatever it was. There wasn't a negotiation. We didn't even know.
Oh my gosh.
Things like that. So everything is negotiable. And I think my feeling is, post-pandemic, is that I'm an optimist, and all of our partners and vendors, we're all kind of in this together, and it has that feeling, specifically in Seattle. So we treat our partners like that. So we try to give them as much information as possible, in good faith, knowing that they've got our interest at heart, and that seems to be working. With stuff
Absolutely.
like this.
And I think when you're spending money at an event, as I was talking yesterday about being an educated consumer around things like technology and AV and stuff like that, it is incumbent upon each planner to be an educated buyer of things. So again, to understand, am I getting the Rolls Royce of projectors, or am I getting the Subaru? Like, really understanding, again, I don't need to know this HP VWRX7 thingy at the end of this bid, and I don't even know whether I'm buying a speaker or, sorry tech guys, I'm just laying out on you guys
Picking
today.
on the AV
But
guys.
yeah, but I don't know if you're not, like, I go in and get my oil changed and I feel like just take my card.
Yeah.
Loan application, you need engine flush, you need this. Okay, whatever. Here, put it on the card. But I'm not really an educated consumer when it comes to like, well, what does that mean to my car? Like, I should be asking more questions. Do I need to have this synthetic, this and this? And
Yeah.
what's it going to give me? Less time to come see you guys? Perfect. Then I'm in. Like, asking your vendors to help explain those costs. I mean, and particularly when we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars,
Yeah.
it's okay to say to somebody, when I was started in the hotel business back in the day, and I kept thinking, learning the revenue streams and like where they make their money, to me, it was like, they don't care if they lose the lunch. The profit margin on that is really low. What they care about is losing 50 hotel rooms where their profit margin is the highest. So understanding that enough to be an educated buyer of something and able to negotiate with them, like, we'll give you all the rooms, but I just don't want to be on the hook for this breakfast because people may not come, and I don't want to pay $10,000 for eggs Benedict. Like, there's just things you can communicate with them when you understand how their numbers work a little bit. You don't have to be experts in it, but a little bit of it.
And then also too, if you have the ability, is to bring in subject matter experts into your planning team. If you have that as an option, we're lucky in that we get to. And I'm looking at two of our AV folks right now, and Tony and Rob just turned up. I know enough about AV to be dangerous, right? And probably in a bad way. But when we have bigger clients, Tony comes along, who's an absolute expert in that space, and Rob, and they'll negotiate on our clients' behalf in other cities.
That's amazing.
Like that.
And having someone read that proposal that knows all what you
Exactly.
are getting the Rolls Royce.
Yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
well, we like
or where to push, right? And where not to push. And it's the same across the board. We have former hotel people on our team that know what the hot topics are with hotels. We have banquet captains on our team, that know food and beverage services and stuff like that.
Do the banquet captains look at the floor plans and go, no, this isn't
Yeah,
this isn't
that's
gonna
exactly
fit.
right. Yeah,
That
exactly
architect
right.
was not so right
Exactly.
on the floor plan.
And even things like, it's the more I think about this and talk about this out loud, it is so hard being an event planner when, a lot of times you're an island. We have a CVent certified developer on our team, right? And if I had to ask our event planning team to manage CVent, they would all quit or tear their eyes out and then quit. So if you can, having an SME help out, be it, this is a finance discussion with creating your documents for budgets, but even all the way through to managing vendors.
I love
Can
that
help.
advice. During the pandemic, when we went to the virtual platforms, I put out an RFP for a virtual platform, and I got a bid for $6,000 and one for $94,000. And talk about not being
Wild
an
West.
educated consumer.
Wild
It
West back
was the
then.
Wild West. And I was asking questions like, again, with the $6,000 ones, well, what is the streaming mechanism? And what about this? And essentially, I was like, are you selling me a car with no engine and no seats and no steering wheel? And they're like, yeah, we just wrap it and make it look cool. And then I'm over here with the $94,000 people, and they're just like, we got these customized avatars. I'm like, we don't need that Rolls Royce. Can we just make sure the guy's sitting there and it looks good and sounds good? Like, so it just is interesting when I found myself not being a very educated consumer, and I did.
I mean, who was though, really?
Oh,
I mean, who
all of
was?
us. But it went to your skill set of
Yeah.
saying, tell me more about this.
Yeah.
Let me understand how it compares apples to apples, because I don't know, so I need you to explain it to me.
Yep.
And we did 80 virtual events on 30 platforms in the very first year. 30 platforms. Every day they were calling me trying to sell me the Wild West.
Yeah.
And it was crazy because you'd get a technician on that could explain how it was going to work, and they would lose me in the first couple minutes, just head explode. And then you get a salesperson. I had a salesperson say to me, "Are you going to do events on our platform?" I'm like, well, that was kind of the reason I called you. This is, you got a salesperson that's been on the job one day. They don't understand the technical part. If I'm getting a Rolls Royce, 10,000 lumen project, they're just a salesperson trying to get the deal. So
there was some good lessons learned there. I feel like, that was, I mean, desperation's kind of the term to use at the time, but, in hindsight, looking back at it, if you've got to take a lessons learned, most of the event platforms, I hope there's no one here from an event platform, but what are they? They're a video player and a chat box. You could get 95% of what a $95,000 platform would give you from YouTube. If the content
100%.
wasn't confidential, you could use Vimeo and make it locked down. In hindsight, so some of the lessons learned there is maybe if there is another crazy the zombie apocalypse or whatever's going to come next, just to sit back a little bit and go, actually, yeah.
I had to build a little model, a little slide for myself to understand that I had all the pieces and parts. Technically, I had to the tech stacks that we were building.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm going to run this through my little crazy little slide I made for myself of like, but what's the streaming? And then how do they
Yep.
interact? And how do they, to be able to compare apples to apples. So that was just a good exercise for me in thinking I send me to any AV person or any hotel or any, transportation company, I can figure out those costs and compare them quickly. A new product
Yep.
that I had to compare and contrast, it was a little bit more challenging. We're going to open it up. Is there anything else you want to add for the good of the order? You have so many notes.
I've got all the notes.
I don't
Let
want
me
to
see if
miss
we
a
missed any
golden
questions.
nugget up in there.
I think we're good. Yeah.
Okay. Questions from you guys? Who wants to be a chief financial officer? No. Yes.
It's not really a question, but just a comment because I'm an event planner. I'm Jean Whiting from National Event Post. And so I do, leadership conferences or trade shows or, whatever. But I'm also a supplier. I'm a vendor. And so, I'll work with a planner who's going to be doing some sort of big corporate picnic. They'll come to me and get an obstacle course and ballistic swing and 20 different games or whatever. And so as far as making sure that out the door you get the right numbers, we kind of have to put the onus back on the client. Do you want us to do the layout? Because we'll set the generators at the right spots. We'll make sure you have the spider boxes at the right places and make sure you have all the equipment you need. But if you're going to be doing that, I will, and they'll just say, well, we'll figure that out. Well, no, because I need to know how many generators. I need to know if it's going to be a 25K or if it's going to be, 4 12Ks or, whatever. Those kinds of things will impact the bottom line, from us to you. So, you have to look at it from both perspectives. And if you expect me to do the whole layout, I'll need to know what else is happening. I will probably put on some sort of small event planning fee because that's not, that's not necessarily indicative of what I do normally, so it's
Yep.
just, you have to put it on also, like if I bring a ballistic swing and a rock wall and a bungee trampoline, that's 3 trucks. That's 3 fuel surcharges that's going to go onto it. But if I'm bringing just obstacle courses and things like that, it might be 1 truck, like a box truck and a pickup. So there's lots of other factors that the more information you give to me from the get-go, the better it is for me to be able to provide you the correct numbers so that it doesn't change.
Yeah.
And I think if I was working on that thing, I would ask, well, it's great that you're explaining all those variable costs, and we can maybe talk a little bit about fixed
Yep.
or variable, but the variable costs, and I might say to you, can you send me 2 proposals? One with you guys doing the whole enchilada, and one if I'm doing a DIY.
Yeah.
which
Which is
which
good.
would be really helpful, right? Because if I see that and go, oh, it's only X dollar, let's just give it to them and let them run with it. So
Yeah.
sometimes I think with your vendors, it's okay to ask for different scenarios because we are in a whole new normal, and it's hard to know even what the client wants to do, but then they're like, well, how much for bungee jump? And you're like, well, I've got questions. How many people are bungeeing and what kind of
Yep.
insurance and how long is
Yep.
it? Yep.
Yeah, I think like again, if it comes down to like just clearly articulating what you're getting for the dollars, I think that makes it easier from the planning side, just knowing that that it is 3 trucks instead of 2 trucks, and this is the tipping point. Just that clarity on the front end, I think, is always helpful.
Well, and also,
Yeah.
you can come to me and say, I'm doing a corporate picnic for 500 people. Well, is your budget, where are you going to have it? How much space do I have? Where are you
Yeah.
going to, are you going to bring in food trucks that I'm going to have to finagle around? Is your budget 20,000 or is it 150,000? Because I can do a great party with stuff for 150, but you've got to, realize your expectations are going to be different for a 20,000.
You mean champagne taste on a beer budget? What?
Yeah.
Who does that?
Yeah.
It is hard to be an event planner. Thank you for that comment. I
Yeah,
appreciate it.
question in the back. So the staff time there, like, yeah, Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I would look to, I mean, I would have, I mean, is it a large pool of people? I mean, I would just kind of have ad hoc conversations and just like, hey, tell me how many hours you put into this. Yeah. You know, the thing is with this stuff, some of the numbers are black and white and easy to attain, revenue, costs, things like that. Some of it is, it's an art form, right? And it's okay that it's an educated guess. So that I would have kind of ad hoc conversations with all the folks and ask them, hey, how many hours do you think you put into this? And then hours is one side of the equation. Then you have to put a rate. So it might be awkward asking the CEO how much they earn to work that out, but maybe the CFO could give you a general, or the finance person could give you a general, hey, use X dollars per hour for all these people, because
Does
that
that
is
give you
fair.
what
You
you
do
need?
want to capture that stuff.
Yeah, and I think
Yeah.
that's a great way to think about it. Is there are the kind of the standard costs that make sense, but then there's all this ancillary expense of time and resources that make this move. I've had a lot of clients that don't want to put any staff time on their budgets. And I'm like, well, you're not really understanding what it costs to make this event go round and round, unless you put something in there to understand that if they were not working on the event, you'd be saving this amount of money. I mean, I think it's important to do that. Did that help give you some guidance on that?
Do you track any other stats outside of the numbers? Yep. Yep. Yeah, I think it is. I think it's
You
okay.
got the
Yeah.
blessing right
Yeah.
here.
Yeah. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, you could get really accurate and say, "Hey, CFO, CEO, you need to fill in a timesheet every week, and I need to know your salary and benefits." But there's a cost benefit to that as well.
There's
Yeah.
also, when you talk about numbers, it's not always money. There's numbers that are really important. Like I would, if I was on a board of a nonprofit like that, I'd say, how many were new donors this year?
That's
What
exactly right.
percentage, new
Yep.
donor? What percent is our re-up and repeat donors? So
Yep.
when you say, what does this cost? Hey, we're doing it well, and people are coming back every year and they continue to give. And there's a stat that can support that.
And that drives your strategy too, right?
Yes.
Because you might have a different strategy for repeat donors than you do new donors, right? So, yep.
Well, and I would track your profit margin, right? Again, I'm not a numbers geek, but when I tell that percentage, I had a guy that belonged. He was a millionaire here in Seattle. He belonged to an EO, and he told me the best advice he ever got: think of everything financial in your world as a business owner as percentages. Don't even put a number. It's not 2.5 billion. It's 30% of your overall income. It's 20% of your repeat customer. And it was so eye-opening to when you do that, because you start. When I did this demographic trend for a client, and they had 80% maintenance people at this random housing conference and no content for maintenance people, I kept thinking, had we not dug up that number, we never designed any content for maintenance people. So how are they finding us? Why are they coming? We're not delivering any great content. But also, did anybody else here know 80% of the people walking around at the conference were maintenance people? And they were just like, we just have never looked into those numbers. So that's where I get that kind of little geeky charge around. Let me unfold this. Let me do this analysis to find out the juicy story of who these people are, who our demo people are, what percentage are the re-ups, who's not here, and all of those numbers tell stories. I guess is and that should inform your decisions. Let's go. And that's the other thing about data. I will say, I don't know if you found this, but data is great, but if you don't interpret it and let it inform your decisions, why collect it?
Yeah.
I'm just
It
gonna
has to.
mic
It
drop
has
on
to
that.
inform decisions.
It does. It does.
Yeah.
And I think C-suite people in other verticals, other businesses think that way. They use all that data. And I think in the event space, we're not great at that.
Yep.
We're not great at knowing our numbers, telling our story, and informing changes, because they're literally just, let's rinse and repeat the annual meeting with the steak lunch, and like there's
Yeah.
no
There's a
creativity
ton
happening because they're
ton of
not
situations.
extracting data.
Yeah, there's a ton of situations that we work on. We have a client that we just worked on last month, and they stream. I wish I was in the hybrid event because I've got some strong views on that. But they streamed this event, and it cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars to stream this event. Because we've streamed it a few times now, we know they get 200 people watching
Right.
live. So why are we streaming it?
So true.
You know, capture the content, cut it up, edit it, put it out there for consumption later, but cut all this cost that we could then spend on the 1,200, 1,100 people that are in person.
Well,
You
you
know,
get
that's the
these
type of
virtual
stuff that you need
event
to look at.
data packets, and again, if you're not interpreting them to go like, oh, what happened? They totally fell off at lunch and nobody came back. Like,
Yeah,
you
or-
know, it's consumer behavior that you're looking at. It's a crazy spreadsheet that
Yeah.
you just go, I don't know how to make heads
Or
or
to
tails.
throw
of
it out there and be controversial for the next one. You know, does anyone have time to watch live events in the middle of the day on a work day?
Let's do it. Throw it out there. I'm all about creating a
So-
ruckus. Do you hear those ripple
Yeah.
effects at the event?
Exactly.
Other questions?
Death to live streaming.
Any other financial questions?
Yeah, I would start with what are the goals, and this sounds highfalutin, but what are the goals and objectives of the event? And then build the budget around that to see where you land with what you want the event to be. So if this is like the very first time you're doing an event, right? You wake up in the morning and this is what I want to do. That's how I would start it, and then look at your revenue items, if it's ticket sales or sponsorship or exhibit sales or whatever the other revenue items are, and see if that can justify the spend, and then go down from there. First time events though, they're always risky, right? So you have to think about underlying that risk. Who's going to pay for it? You know, if you're off by $100,000 or $200,000, that's how I would start it. I would start with, you know, I always like starting events the very first time with, hey, we can do anything we want, you know, and working back from there.
And then you look
Within
at the
reason.
bottom line and go,
Within
"Oh,
reason, yeah.
we're not going to have an,
Yeah.
an elephant at the entrance.
Yeah. Justin Bieber on an elephant.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I was going to say something about the budgeting process. It's interesting sometimes, again, telling the story. Like, I'll have a client that's getting ready to sign a hotel contract, and I will say to them, I just want to remind you, and I try to put this in writing, I just want to remind you, when you sign this, you are on the hook for $245,000 worth of hotel revenue. Are we clear on that? Got it? Because, you know, you send it over to them, hey, you want to sign this? You told me you wanted 60 rooms for 4 nights or whatever, but I really want to make sure you understand what you're on the hook for. So our team uses that a lot, you know. Out the door and on the hook are things that we use in our financial conversations all the time. So just a tip on that. I do want to talk about fixed and variable costs a little bit. This is, again, kind of geeky, but you do have to understand the fixed expenses of whether 10 or 1,000 show up, you're still going to pay X to have lights, camera, action. Fixed cost. If you're going to have a buffet, variable cost. If you have 10 people, when are your guarantees due? But it is important to kind of understand those two things. And I don't know why it's important. How does that inform your budgeting when you're?
Yeah, I
but
mean,
you
it
need
just
to
means
identify them.
Normally, it's like if you think about it a different way, is like what, you know, the fixed costs are your minimum that you have to kind of generate to cover.
Right.
And then after that, say for example, if you're going to rent out Chihuly Garden and Glass, right? There's a venue rental fee. You could have 5 people in there, or you could have 400 people in there. So you need to know that bottom, you know.
On the hook.
Yeah, it's the on the hook.
Yeah. Got it. Okay.
Yeah, and then there's the F&B minimum as well.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's a variable cost because if you're charging, you should have money coming in.
I mean, where it's
to pay for
important
your
is that when you are doing budget mitigation, if you've got issues with your budget, that's the things that you can probably affect the least.
Yeah.
You know, you're on the hook for the venue. You know, you can cut down the F&B, you can change the F&B, but you're on the hook for the venue.
I also heard a great, my dad told me a tip, sales solves everything. And he could not have been truer.
Revenue covers all
Revenue
sins.
drives, revenue covers, that's probably the technical term.
Yeah.
Revenue covers all sins, but sales solves everything. And I go back to the example of, you know, if we've got 10,000 people coming to this event, if they all pay $3 more, we're going to be able to cover this, right? Because it was one of those things where we're all like, how do we pay for this thing? It's like, you know, sales solves everything. I mean, or sell more sponsors or sell a higher ticket price sponsor. But any other
question?
Yeah, was there?
Yeah.
A couple.
Yeah.
But there's also, right, the Seattle freeze where you just don't buy the concert ticket until the day before.
Yeah. Last minute.
Yeah, like contingency planning for overages. Is it just still the same mentality of cost mitigation, or how do you approach that?
Yeah. And I think part of it is building contingencies into the budget at the start is huge. Just knowing that there's last minute stuff that pops up, or exactly that. Maybe you don't hit your ticket sales because everybody's last minute, and it's really hard to forecast. Um,
Clients are asking us for scenarios, right? Worst case, bottom line, worst,
yeah,
middle of the road. We feel confident we can hit this and stretch. So
yeah.
that
And
fancy Excel sheet now has the scenarios on
thinking
there.
about this now, and I know we talked about it recently, but I think we used to have 10% contingencies that are now getting up to 20% because of that. So including that in your budget, yes, is prudent.
Windfalls, right? Where you're like, oh man, like we have more revenue, we have more people. Like, is
Yep.
it the cost thought, or is it like,
Yeah.
is it revenue thought?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Whatever
Question?
you can affect. If you can drive more revenue, then great. Yeah.
I'm taking the question from the one with the lucky bamboo
Yeah.
shoot, because we're all going to have lots of money to account for.
So I'm with a nonprofit, and we have a golf tournament that we run every year. I've been in charge of it for probably the last 4 or 5 years. The people that were actually running it before, I'm always looking at it. Okay, we need to improve this. We can make more money next year by doing these certain things. They'll take they'll figure out sponsorships to cover the costs, and then if we have just individual golfers or foursomes or whatever, I don't feel like we're charging enough. I feel like we can charge more. In fact, we're at Newcastle Golf Course. I've talked to them. I'm like, yeah, this is all we're charging, and they're like, what? Like, other companies come in there and they charge a lot more. So me trying to convince them on why we need to charge more. For instance, you've got the golf cost, you've got the food. We give an awesome swag bag. We have, either breakfast and lunch or lunch and dinner included at the golf course. And they want to charge $150 a person.
I mean, I'm a golfer.
I'll sign up for it.
Yeah, I'm a
Yeah,
golfer,
that's a cheap day there.
and that's a great course.
Yeah.
What words can I give to them to say, look, this is, we need to charge more. We're losing money.
Well, that story should
Yeah. I mean, you're leaving money on the table.
leaving money on the table, which
Yeah.
is great.
I would ask Newcastle. They're really helpful, but and they're doing charity events there day in and day out. I feel like, to give you some competitive analysis, right? And, what are other nonprofits charging for their golf days up there? That information, you could probably get fairly easily. I would then look at your number of individual, types of attendees, if it's individual players or foursomes, and take an average of whatever everyone else is charging in a similar vein to your nonprofit, and put that in there, apply it, so that you can say, look, if we did what these guys are doing, we would make X amount of dollars or more dollars. So it's just crystal clear. And if they say, well, how can we charge that much? Then you can say, well, this nonprofit does it, this nonprofit does it, this nonprofit does it. And then, you know about your attendees too. Do you think they're going to care by paying an extra $150 a day?
A lot of them are airline employees, so, that are just paying the fees. Just, they're not the sponsors or whatever. So
Yep.
I think they're afraid of losing those people. But my thoughts is, our event sells out quickly. That's why we're
Right.
Yeah, that's a
flying out the whole day, and running double in the morning and double in the afternoon.
Right.
that's a thing, right? That's a key piece of important information
Supply
right
and
there.
demand.
Yeah, if you're selling out real quickly, supply and demand, exactly. Your prices are probably too low.
And
That's
I'm
another
a
thing.
golfer. I go to Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what though? I think it is about telling the story visually. Again, a graph with here's 5 other nonprofit associations and here's what they charge their golf tournament folks. Also, if you realize that this is an uphill battle, you can't maybe go from price, explosion to go to a little bit of price creep.
Yeah,
That
can be a strategy.
what the marketplace will bear of being like, I've played in this for the last 10 years. I already wrote my $150 check. You're telling me it's 300. But on the other hand, I'm a golfer. I played in tons of tournaments. If I'm going to go to Newhouse, that's a great course. I'm going to pay $185 retail.
Especially if it comes with lunch.
Yeah,
Like,
lunch,
the
and
food's
swag,
pretty good
and-
there too. Yeah.
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 I think it's the story. It's the story that we were talking about. So they don't that you won't capture their attention around it should not be 150, it should be 149.87.5. You have to tell a story. We are 3 times less expensive than all other charity
Yeah,
golf
exactly.
tournaments. It's that soundbite.
Yeah.
It's people who play this course on average pay $185 per person. If we raise it to 165, they're still getting a $20 discount. Like it's those
Exactly.
it's that kind of juicy story that will get their attention. These people are probably just like, again, have the tournament. It's great. And when you flash up the slide that says, we're losing money on this gig, whoever is the stakeholder, nobody wants to see that or hear that. Even if you've been beating that drum, show it to them and show it to a wider group of stakeholders where they go, ooh, we need to fix that.
Yeah.
That doesn't work. That's not sustainable. Yeah. That's a great point. And the other thing would be maybe looking at team sales and figuring out of your players how many are writing their own check out of their own account and how
Versus
many
a
are
company.
a company paying for it.
Yeah.
Because the company's not going to squawk if it's another $30.
Don't even think about it.
But even the individuals, are they paying personally or are their companies paying? Because that is okay. So, and honestly, maybe you consider even a different price tier or a code you send them for those that you know are not coming from. There's a lot of different ways, but I think you need to do some attention grabbing around we're priced way too low and we're losing money. This just in. Breaking news. So good luck with that. Any other questions? I know we're at time. So thank you all for being here to
Yeah,
listen
thank
to
you
our
all.
Thinking Like a CFO. Thank you, Brett, for being here.
Thanks for
I
hosting,
so
Lyndon. It's a
appreciate it.
pleasure to be here.
And enjoy the rest of the Northwest Event Show. Share any feedback or information. I think there's surveys somewhere, but let us know if you enjoyed the conversation. Thanks, tech team. Appreciate you guys letting me rake you over the coals back there. Sharpen those pencils. I'm just kidding. I'll take the 700 lumen projector. It's fine. Oh yeah, push music.